දවස් 30ක්ම unlimited Netflix බලන්න. unlimited data pack එකක් මුළු පවුලටම unlimited fun එකක් අරගන්න. අදම active කරගන්න.
ලෙන්ගතුකම වැඩි කරගන්න ලව්ජු රුපියල් 50ට අඩු කළා.
මාමේ එන්න අපිට එකක් බොමු.
Tonight, the right priorities. State Minister Cabral says the government policy is not about killing the proverbial golden goose.
Because the government revenue is actually your expenditure. If the government is collecting more and more taxes, it would mean that the ordinary people of this country have to pay more and more.
Readying for reopening. Health and safety guidelines for possible limited tourist arrivals to be presented next week before airports reopen. Mystery tremors. Mahaveli minister says Kandy tremors pose no risk to the Victoria and Randanikala dams. What a match! Australia subjects India to its all-time lowest test score to win the first test in 3 days. All this and much more coming up on this Saturday, the 19th of December 2020.
නව sunlight sakura. Then දික්කල් පවතින sakura මල් සුවඳින්.
Try out our new product range. Celebrate and feel the difference with Bairaha.
From AdaDerana, this is AdaDerana First at 9. Live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
Good evening and welcome to First at 9. I'm Shanella Fernando. Let's move on to your top stories for tonight. State Minister for Money, Capital Market and State Enterprise Reforms Ajit Niwad Cabral expressed confidence in the country's tax policies, stressing that the government intends to follow a fair and consistent tax policy without killing the goose that lays the golden eggs. Speaking to Indivaria Muatta at Hyde Park on AdaDerana 24, the State Minister insisted that sound economic policies would attract investments, driving Sri Lanka towards a robust economy.
The economy, the government relies very much on taxes imposed, but we see that in recent times the government, the present government, has sort of like blocked possible avenues of tax income to the economy, trying to create that enabling environment. So how are we going to look at revenue to the economy?
You see, the most important thing about revenue is that it must be possible for people to pay, because the government revenue is actually your expenditure. If the government is collecting more and more taxes, it would mean that the ordinary people of this country have to pay more and more. Businesses will have to pay more and more, and that is going to impact the businesses also significantly. So the government has to be conscious of this balance. If you were to deprive the base of the possibility for it to grow, it would be like this proverbial killing of the golden goose that laid the golden eggs. What this government has done is to have reasonable tax rates with reasonable percentages being imposed, so that people can still part with a part of their income and not be significantly deprived of their own capacity to invest further.
A report that has been released by Oxford Economics on the economics of illicit tobacco in Sri Lanka. Now, this report, Minister, estimates that the Sri Lankan government missed out on between 24.5 billion rupees and 35.3 billion due to illicit industry and the products in 2019. We saw that the Prime Minister during the budget speech also touched on the illicit industry, the need to contain, need to address this. What's your observation about Sri Lanka's illicit industry and how we address the current challenges?
What you mean by illicit industry is actually smuggling. If they were to pay taxes on the products that they are manufacturing or distributing, that industry will become legitimate. Our government is also conscious. We do recognize that in the case of liquor, in the case of tobacco, in the case of some some other items as well where the duty element is there. The government may be losing some revenues. Those need to be addressed and the due revenues brought into the government coffers.
What socio-economic impacts do you observe here?
When you have income which is not declared, there is a great possibility that that can be channeled to other illegal avenues as well. So it's in the interests of all to ensure that the proper revenues are collected by the government, that all the avenues through which revenues are coming into the country are legitimately accounted for. We have seen terrorism financing or money laundering has taken place from monies that have been generated by illegal means. At the same time, we got to ensure that we come down hard on those who go on these types of activities as well.
As the government, what are your priorities, especially when we talk about revenues and ensuring that the economy runs?
We want to have a tax regime which is fair and which is consistent, where people can take investment decisions. Because that's very vital that people are able to take long-term investment decisions, because through those decisions we can activate the economy very easily. And at the same time, we expect the taxes to be paid by the people who are doing business in the country. Now, if there is a leakage that is occurring, it's in the interest of the government to ensure that those leakages are plugged and that those are not able to function in the future, so that whatever that is being done in Sri Lanka is a legitimate business which is yielding revenues to the government. With that kind of a strategy, I think we can ensure that the revenues will be consistent and the government coffers will be improving.
We're looking at a very challenging year. How optimistic are you in terms of going forward?
Economic management is all about meeting challenges. You will never have a situation where everything is rosy. It is as to how you deal with the challenges, how you anticipate the challenges, how you would prepare your forces to deal with that particular challenge. That's what we're doing. If you don't have a proper exchange rate policy, if you don't have interest rate policy which is targeting low interest rates, if you don't have sound inflation management, no amount of what you do will be of any value. Attracting investment is based on sound economic policies, sound messages that you convey to the outside world. And that's what Sri Lanka is doing. It will take a little time, but we can see the way in which investment is coming into the country. We've seen how the macro fundamentals have stabilized. Once those things happen, you will find that the economy will get back into the robust path.
Safeguard hand sanitizer නවතම නිෂ්පාදන පෙළ නීරෝගිමත් දිවියකට ලංකාවේ පළමු වරට හඳුන්වා දෙන මැලිබන් වෙජි ක්‍රැකර්
Crunchy Veggie.
Deputy Director General of Public Health Services Dr. Hemanta Herat says that rapid antigen testing of travellers leaving the Western Province is being carried out to prevent the formation of fresh clusters around the island, and called for the public to provide their support in conducting the tests. In the meantime, Director General of Health Services Dr. Asela Gunawardena says that schools can be reopened for grades 1 to 5 in January as long as safety protocols are followed. However, no decision pertaining to the reopening of schools in Western Province has been made yet.
The total number of COVID-19 related deaths in Sri Lanka increased to 165 after 5 more were reported yesterday. The deceased include 2 residents of the Kalaturi district, 2 of the Colombo district and a resident of the Gampa district. Yesterday, 662 infections were identified from 18 districts, out of which 259 were confirmed in the Colombo district. The infections detected from the Colombo area include 44 from the Blumendal area, 33 from Demetagoda, 25 from Altkare, 22 from Buralla, 21 from Matakulia, 19 from Velavatta and 14 from Maradana. With that, 164 infections were detected in Kalutara, 79 from Gampaha, 46 from Kandy, 26 from Matara, 18 from Gaul, 16 each from Kurunegala and Ratnapura and 6 from Jaffna. Furthermore, 5 infections each were reported from Nurelia and Badiklo, 4 from Ampara and Vavunia, and 3 each from Hambantura and Munragala. What's more, 3 infections each were reported from Trincomalee, Puttalam and Mathale yesterday. In the meantime, Director General of Health Services Dr. Asela Gunawardena says that necessary guidelines for tourist arrivals will be handed over to the relevant authorities by next week.
සංචාරක කර්මාන්තය යළි පළගැන්වීම සඳහා නියම ව්‍යාපෘතියක් විදියට දෙසැම්බර් මාස 26 වෙනිදා සිට ජනවාරි මාස 19 දක්වා සංචාරකයන් සීමා සහිතව ලංකාවට ගේන්න තමයි යෝජනා කරලා තියෙන්නේ. එතකොට ඒ සඳහා අවශ්‍ය සෞඛ්‍ය ආරක්ෂණ ක්‍රමවේදයන් අපි යෝජනා කරලා තියෙනවා. ඊළඟ සතිය වෙනකොට අපි මේ සියලුම ක්‍රමවේදයන් ඔවුන්ට ලබා දෙනවා. සංචාරකයන් මම හිතන්නේ ඉතාමත්ම දැඩි සෞඛ්‍ය ආරක්ෂක ක්‍රමවේදයන් අනුව ලංකාවට ඇවිල්ලා මේ අවශ්‍ය නිරෝධායන කටයුතු වලට සහභාගී වෙලා ඒ අවශ්‍ය පරීක්ෂණත් කරලා ඔවුන් අර ජෛව බුබුලක් විදියට තමයි මේ රට තුල සැරිසරුවත් සැරිසරන්නේ.
The Director General also commented about the reopening of schools for grades 1 to 5.
දැනට එක ශ්‍රේණියේ සිට පා ශ්‍රේණිය තෙක් පටන් නොගත් පාසල් ජනවාරි මාස පාසල් නිවාඩුවෙන් පසුව අධ්‍යාපන අමාත්‍යාංශය විසින් නිවේදනය කරන ලබන දිනයකදී පටන් ගන්නවා ඇති. බස්නාහිර පළාත ඇතුළත් නොවේ අනිකුත් පළාත්වල පමණක් පටන් ගැනීමට තමයි දැනට තීරණය කළා තියෙන්නේ. ඒ පිළිබඳව අවශ්‍ය සම්පූර්ණ උපදෙස් නුදුරු අනාගතයේදී අධ්‍යාපන අමාත්‍යාංශය විසින් නිකුත් කරනවා ඇති. සියලුම පාසල් එක ශ්‍රේණියේ සිට පස්වෙනි ශ්‍රේණිය දක්වා අප දැනටමත් ලබා දී ඇති සෞඛ්‍ය ක්‍රමවේද අනුගමනය කරමින් හිම පාසල් පටන් ගත යුතුයි. යම්කිසි අවස්ථාවක මොනහරි අවදානමක් තියෙනවා නම් පාසල් වැහිමට බලතල හිම අදාළ ප්‍රදේශයේ බලධාරීන්ට දීලා තමයි අපි මේ පාසල් විවෘත කරන්නේ.
In another development, Deputy Director General of Public Health Services Dr. Hemanta Herath touched on the reasons for antigen testing those leaving the Western Province.
Why we are doing this random sampling is, firstly, we want to get an idea as to how many people will be leaving with virus to other parts of the country. And also, this will help to detect at least few number of cases that might spread the disease into their loved one to whom they are going to see, and also probably it will prevent the creation of new clusters in different parts of the island. I would urge the public, if this opportunity is given to you to be tested for antigen, please cooperate and make sure that the test is properly done so that you will be safe and your loved one will be safe.
Meanwhile, the total number of COVID-19 recoveries in Sri Lanka increased to 27,552 after 491 more patients recovered and were discharged from hospitals today. With that, the country's active cases now stand at 8,827.
Discussions between the foreign ministries of Sri Lanka and Romania were held this week, where cooperation in a range of areas was discussed. During the meeting, the head of the Sri Lankan delegation, Foreign Secretary Admiral Professor Jainath Columbage, announced the opening of a Sri Lanka embassy in Romania next year.
Foreign Secretary Admiral Professor Jainath Columbage and State Secretary for Foreign Affairs of Romania, Colonel Faruta, held virtual bilateral Foreign Office consultations this week. A new roadmap for enhanced cooperation in prioritized sectors between Sri Lanka and Romania were identified at the third session of the Sri Lanka-Romania bilateral consultations. During the meeting, the head of the Sri Lankan delegation and Foreign Secretary Admiral Professor Jainath Columbage announced the opening of a Sri Lankan embassy in Romania next year and reaffirmed Sri Lanka's commitment to further consolidate the excellent bilateral engagement spanning 63 years between the two nations. Foreign Secretary Columbage also provided an overview of the economic and development priorities of the new government and highlighted the government's people-centric and knowledge-driven new beginning for Sri Lanka and defined the 21st century as one of knowledge and innovation. Focusing on cooperation in the labour sector, State Secretary Faruta stated that despite the pandemic, Romania has continued to issue work permits to skilled and semi-skilled workers from Sri Lanka. He stated that only this week 1,500 new work permits had been issued. There are currently over 8,000 Sri Lankan workers in Romania employed predominantly in the apparel, hospitality and construction sectors, with more skilled job opportunities opening up in other fields. State Secretary Faruta further stated that the economic stimulus offered by the Romanian government to workers in Romania had also been extended to cover foreign workers. The discussions were wide-ranging and substantive and reviewed bilateral interests and ongoing programs in the political, economic, education, energy, agriculture, labour, security, education and social areas. The two delegations also agreed to revitalize and expand the bilateral trade and investment portfolio to take advantage of the EU's GSP Plus facilities and access the wider markets in Central Europe and Asia. Further, technical assistance in locomotive rehabilitation and production, capacity building to address skill gaps in the oil and gas sector, and agri-processing were identified as areas for further cooperation. The talks also reviewed shared interests in the regional and multilateral areas.
More news on the other side of this break. Stay tuned.
Ceylon Bank, the bank with a heart.
Welcome back in more news. Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa says that the hopes for an expressway to the central province will be fulfilled in just a few years' time, with construction officially kicking off today. Meanwhile, head of the Presidential Task Force on Economic Revival and Poverty Eradication, Basil Rajapaksa says that the government has dashed the opposition's expectations of a bankrupt country unable to honour its dues.
Construction work on the third phase of the Central Expressway from Potuhara to Galagedara commenced today under the patronage of Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa.
මම කන්ද උඩරට ගියාම හැමදාම සියලු දේශපාලඥයෝ මගෙන් ආන්නේ කවදද අපිට අධිවේගී මාර්ගය ලැබෙන්නේ කියලා. ඉතින් ඒ අධිවේගී මාර්ගය අපිට දැන් බලාපොරොත්තු තියාගන්න පුළුවන්. අද ආරම්භ වෙලා අවුරුදු කිහිපයක් ඇතුළත අපිට ඒ කාර්යය ඉටු කරන්න පුළුවන්කම ලැබෙවි. මම වැඩිම සන්තෝෂ වෙනවා අද විශේෂයෙන්ම ජොන්සන් ප්‍රධානමන්ත්‍රී ඇමතුමා ලේකම්තුමාත් මේ පිළිබඳව විශේෂ අවධානය යොමු කරලා සමාගම් වලට දෙන්නේ නැතුව මගනැගුම වැඩපිළිවෙල ගත් කිරීම තුලින් මහා මාර්ග අමාත්‍යාංශයෙන්ම මේ වැඩපිළිවෙල කරන්න තමයි බලාපොරොත්තු.
In the meantime, the Sabargamuwa province meeting on the implementation of the budget 2021 proposals worked off in Ratnapura today.
සමස්ත ලංකාව ආර්ථික වශයෙන් කඩා වැටෙයි කියලා විශේෂයෙන්ම රේටිං ආයතන ශ්‍රේණිගත කරන ආයතන අපිව පල්ලෙහාට දාලා තියෙන වෙලාවක තමයි අපි මේ අයවැය ඉදිරිපත් කරේ. සමස්ත විපක්ෂයම වගේ සමහරව කැමැත්තෙන් හිටියා අපි ණය ගෙවා ගන්න බැරි රටක් හැටියට වාරික ගෙවන්න නැතුව අපිව බංකොලොත් රටක් හැටියට නම් කරයි කියලා. නමුත් අපි විවිධ සීමා දාලා විවිධ විදියේ පාලනයන් දාලා යම් යම් මහජන අපහසුතාවයන් මැද අපිට පුළුවන් වුණා අපේ ණය ගෙවලා ණය ගෙවන හොඳ රටක් හැටියට යම් ආකාරයකින් පවත්වාගෙන යන්න. සමහරුන්ට දොස් කියලා තියෙනවා වාහන ගෙන්නන්න දෙන්නේ නැහැ කියලා. අපි ඒ වාහන ගෙන්නන්න දුන්නොත් සාමාන්‍යයෙන් බිලියන 2ක් පමණ වාර්ෂිකව වියදම් වෙනවා. අපිට බෙහෙත් අමුද්‍රව්‍ය ඒ වගේම තෙල් ඉන්ධන නොගෙන්නලා අපිට ගෙන්නන්න පුළුවන්. අපි සමහර වෙලාවට මේ රටේ නිෂ්පාදනය කරන්න පුළුවන් කහවැනි දේවල් නතර කරලත් අපි සමස්ත ජනතාවට යම් ආකාරයක හිරිහැරයක් වුණත් මේ වෙලාවේ අපිට සිද්ධ වුණා ඒ වැනි සීමාවන් කරන්න.
Opposition leader Sajith Premadasa accused the government of leading the country astray and hoodwinking its voters. He made these comments when he met with farmers in the Mahayangana area at a public event.
Opposition leader Sajith Premadasa met with farmers in Mahayangana today, where he engaged them in discussions centered on the various problems they face.
නොමිලේ පොහොර ලබා දෙනවා කිව්වට මේ හැම වර්ගයකින්ම ලබා දෙන පොහොර ප්‍රමාණය ප්‍රමාණාත්මකව අඩු කරලා තිබෙනවා. සේනා දළබුවා නිසා සිදු වී තිබෙන මහා පරිමාණයේ හානියට රජයෙන් විසඳුමකුත් නැහැ, උපදෙසුත් නැහැ. කෘෂි උපකරණ හිඟය සහ කෘෂි උපකරණවල අධික මිල ගොවියා ශක්තිමත් කරනවායි කියන යුගයක කෘෂි උපකරණ ගන්නට ගොවියාට හැකියාවක් නොමැති නම් ඒ වගේම වාරි පද්ධතිය ප්‍රතිසංස්කරණය කිරීම ගැන අද වෙන විට ජාතික සැලැස්මක් නැහැ. වනාලි සහ මිනිස් අතර තිබෙන ගැටලුවට තිරසර විසඳුමක් නැහැ. මට මතකයි පහුගිය ජනාධිපතිවරණයේදී මේ හැම දෙයකම ෂණික විසඳුම් තිබෙන කණ්ඩායමක් හැටියට තමයි අපේ ප්‍රතිවාදීන් ජනතාව අතරට ආවේ. ඉතින් ඇත්තම කතා කරනවා නම් අද රටේ සත්‍ය කුමක්ද? 69 ලක්ෂයම රැවටිලා 69 ලක්ෂයකගේ වරම නිසා ලක්ෂ 220කට ආසන්න වූ රටේ පුරවැසියන් සියලු දෙනාම අනාථ වෙලා. ආයාලේ යන රටක් බවට අද රටපත් වෙලා.
The Elections Commission has decided to immediately inform the provincial councils and the Ministry of Local Government to take necessary steps to resolve legal issues, including obstacles in the Act regarding the filling of vacancies in the local government institutions. The decision was taken when the Commission convened yesterday. The Commission also noted that although 7 billion rupees has been allocated for the 2019 presidential election, expenditure has been reduced to 4.56 billion. With public concern rising over the threat to the country's dams from the recent tremors in the Kandy district, the State Minister of Maha Valley Development says that reports show no risk exists.
Kandy has been experiencing several earth tremors recently, raising public concerns over possible safety risks. Widespread information about the tremors have given rise to suspicions of possible damage to the Victoria Dam. With that, State Minister for Maha Valley Development Siripala Gamlath visited the reservoir today to inquire into the matter. Addressing a media briefing after the inspection, the State Minister said that the reports have proven that none of these tremors have affected the Victoria, Brandenigala and Rantambe dams. Further, the chief engineer in charge of the Mavli reservoirs, Indika Arupola, says that the stability of the dams can be guaranteed. However, they will be conducting observations at different times to ensure whether the stability of the dams are in line with international safety standards.
6 suspects, including a criminal gang member, have been taken into custody by the Police Special Task Force. The arrests were made during a raid carried out in the Vaskaduwa area last night. The suspects have been handed over to Kalutara North Police Station for further investigations. 2 of the suspects were identified as close associates of slain underworld figure Ratmalane Raha. The Supreme Court has decided to call for clarifications on the contempt of court case against MP Ranjan Ramanayake on January 12, 2021. The case was taken up yesterday before a judge bench comprising Justices Vidit Malalgoda, Murdu Fernando and Esture Raja under a motion filed by the Attorney General. The case was filed against former State Minister Ranjan Ramanayake over contempt of court charges for making defamatory remarks against the judiciary on the 21st of August in 2017. Speaking to the media following a meeting with then Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe at the Temple Trees, Ramanayake had claimed that the majority of judges in the country issue biased rulings and that they are corrupt. Based on these complaints, the Attorney General had later served charges against Ramanayake before the Supreme Court. We'll return after this short commercial break. Stay tuned. Welcome back in your business news. The Western Province has secured 39.1% of the country's nominal GDP, the largest share of all the provinces, followed by the Central Province that contributed 11.5% and the Northwestern Province with 10.7%. This was revealed in the Central Bank's provincial GDP report released today.
The Western Province secured 39.1% of the country's nominal GDP, the largest share of all the provinces. However, due to improved contributions from other provinces, the share recorded a decline of 0.5% from 2018. The Central Province that contributed 11.5% and the Northwestern Province with 10.7% were ranked second and third respectively. Provincial GDP shares showed increases in the Northern, Eastern, Northwestern and Sabargamu provinces, while the Western, Central, Southern, North Central and Uva provinces showed share decreases year on year. In terms of provincial contribution to economic activities, all provinces have contributed fairly in terms of agricultural activities, ranging from 8.4% to 15.9%, whereas the Southern, Northwestern and Central provinces were the top contributors to agricultural activities in the country. The Western Province has dominated industry activities with the contribution of 45.8%, while the Central and Northwestern provinces came second and third respectively. In terms of services activities, the Western Province recorded the highest contribution of 39.6%, while the Central and Southern provinces were second and third. Compared to the previous year, the Northern and Northwestern provinces showed an increase in their shares across the 3 activities. On the contrary, the Central and North Central province shares in all activities declined from the previous year, while other provinces showed a mixed performance.
In your international news, the China National Space Administration today handed over lunar samples brought back by the Chang'e 5 probe to the Chinese Academy of Sciences for further research. A handover ceremony was held at the administration and Vice Premier Liu He delivered a speech to mark the historic event. Liu stressed the need for further efforts in organizing more scientists to do research on the samples so as to achieve more scientific results for better understanding of the universe. Over 80 guests, including leading officials of the Ministry of Science and Technology and CNSA and Vice Governor of Hainan Province, where the spacecraft was launched, as well as engineers and scientists involved in the Chang'e 5 mission, also attended the ceremony. The lunar samples were then transferred to the CAS National Astronomical Observatory for further studies. According to preliminary measurement, the Chang'e 5 probe collected about 1,731 grams of lunar samples. In sports, Australia claimed a stunning victory of 8 wickets in their first test match played against India with 2 more days to go. After winning the toss, India scored 244 runs in their first innings. However, Australia was only able to score 191 runs in theirs. India ended at 9 runs for the fall of a wicket yesterday, the second day of the game. In the meantime, the third day was a day to forget for the tourists, as 8 wickets fell in just 45 minutes after commencing the session. Last man Mohammad Shami was forced to retire when he was struck by a delivery from Pat Cummins, and the score was then at 36 runs. Josh Hazlewood and Pat Cummins, who destroyed the Indian batting order, bagged 4 and 5 wickets respectively. Australia went past the target of 90 runs with the fall of just 2 wickets. With that, we wrap up tonight's edition of First at 9. Thank you for joining. I'm Shanella Fernando. Have a good night.